Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And this year, I've found myself often talking about how the worlds of music and technology have collided. But today, I want to explore how the worlds of art and technology is colliding too. What's it like to create something that most people think is impossible? Well, inspired by the $430,000 auction of the first AI artwork ever created, Ben Cavalis and his friends set out to turn science fiction into reality and make AI art affordable for everyone. And their art AI gallery features one-of-a-kind artworks generated entirely by computer algorithms. And even more incredible, it teaches itself to create more and more mesmerising pieces over time. And what started out as a clever idea has grown way beyond anyone's wildest expectations and is currently captivating artists and art lovers around the world. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Tel Aviv in Israel, where Ben is waiting to tell us all about this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Most certainly. So first of all, thank you so much for having me, Neil. My name is Ben Cavalis, and I am a co-founder and the CMO at Art AI, which is a startup, which is also an art gallery and an e-commerce that develops unique technology for producing AI-generated artworks, and currently serves as the world's largest AI-generated art gallery.
And I believe you were inspired by the $430,000 auction of the first AI artwork ever created. And you and your friends set out to turn this science fiction into reality and make it affordable for everyone. But can I ask that you share that story behind Art AI?
All really started at October 2018, where a portrait called Portrait of Edmond de Bellamy was sold for $432,000, as you just mentioned. And it created shockwaves all around the tech and art community. It was truly unprecedented, and it was the first AI-generated artwork that was ever sold at an auction. And up until this point, most people didn't even knew that creating art using AI was even possible. And I founded Art AI together with my two childhood friends, Guy Chaimovitz, who was working for a well-known cybersecurity high-tech company in Israel at the time, and Eyal Fisher, who was in the process of completing his PhD in mathematical genomics at Cambridge University, who is also the CEO of the company. And we were all big tech savvy and also enthusiastic about art. And as soon as Eyal saw this groundbreaking piece of PR news, he had quite interesting thoughts about it. And I've known Eyal since kindergarten, so pretty much as early as I can remember myself. And like many Israelis in our age group, we wanted to build a startup together. And we were charmed by the potential of neural networks. And we were bouncing around ideas for a potential startup. Hopefully that would include the usage of neural networks. So after seeing the sale of Edmond de Bellamy, Eyal came up to me with the idea of creating a far superior algorithm, far superior technology that could not only generate a much higher quality of art, because I don't know if everyone that are listening right now know how Edmond de Bellamy looks like, but as the prototype of AI-generated portraits, even though it is amazing that it exists, it is not of the highest quality. It is, let's say, kind of blurry. So Eyal believed that with his knowledge, he will be able to create a far superior algorithm, and not only one that will be able to create very beautiful images, but do that in scale, and thus enabling everyone to purchase an original piece without breaking the bank, not to waste over $100,000 on a single piece, but invest about $100 in getting a one-of-a-kind piece for yourself, which was, of course, completely unheard of, not only in the AI community, but generally in the art community. And he believed that with his knowledge in image processing in the molecular level, he could create something the world never seen before. At the time, I was working as a VP of sales and marketing at a high-tech company dealing with e-commerce in the financial education sector. And I was thrilled about the potential of this concept. So I challenged him to create such an algorithm and kind of undertook to start a company and open an online store once the algorithm is capable of creating really visually appealing designs. And about 6 months later, we had a working prototype. It was nothing like the algorithms that we're using today, but it was definitely fascinating, and it was able to create images that we were completely happy with how they look like and even willing to hang them in our homes. Of course, the first version was the actual version that we opened the company with, but it is not the version that we're using right now. And with Guy's experience in software architecture, that was key for building the infrastructure that allows high-scale generation of art and presenting this art in intuitive web interface, it was more than enough for us to go forward with the idea.
Love it. And here in 2021, Art AI Gallery features one-of-a-kind artworks generated entirely by computer algorithms. And even more incredible, I believe it teaches itself to create more and more mesmerizing pieces over time. But can you tell listeners a little bit more about this and help them understand what you're doing? Because it sounds incredibly cool.
There are several levels of technology and creativity that are involved in the creation process. The most basic process, which is just the tip of the iceberg, but it's very important to start with it, utilizes principles that are based on GANs, which stand for generative adversarial networks. In this process, we train two different neural networks to two different AIs, each with its own role. Let's call the first one the critic. So this AI never creates actual art. Instead, it learns all about human art, and the way that it is actually learning about human art is to make it happen, we feed the critic with millions of art samples from basically the past 1,500 years for it to get inspired and gain the ability to recognize different artistic elements. So it doesn't copy and paste actual art that was created by humans. It just goes over them and it learns from them. Similarly to how we as humans learn about art and kind of get inspired, it depends on the different art that we see throughout our life or different concepts that we can translate into artistic elements. So the same way this neural network is working. And the critic task is to identify whether a specific art piece was created by a human or by an AI. And we're going to return why this is so important for the training process in just a bit. And the other AI, the other neural network, its adversary, and let's call it the artist. And the artist, not like the critic, never gets exposed to any type of art. It doesn't know how human art looks like. And it is created with the purpose of constantly generating new designs and sending these designs to the critic with the goal of, let's say, kind of tricking the critic so it will believe that the creations that are made by this AI artist are actually created by human. And if you remember, we told that the pure goal of the critic is to be able to identify which is AI and which is human and do it as best as possible. And the critic's way of distinguishing human art from AI art is simply by grading the designs that are sent over its way. So it gives them a grade from 0 to 1. It could be anything in the middle. And the goal is whenever it identifies human art, it needs to give it something that as close as possible to 1, like 0.9, 0.95. And it needs to get as close as it can to 0 if we think that it is an AI-generated artwork. So the artist tries to get the highest possible grade, of course, and the critic tries to give it the lowest possible grade. And in every training ground, the critic gets both a human-made art and an AI art without knowing which one is which. and grades them as it sees fit. So it looks for artistic elements that it knows from human created art. And usually it sees a lot of them in the human art. And in the beginning, of course, it doesn't see too many of them with the AI art. So its ability to properly criticize the art really depends on the formation of weights that comprise its neural network. So I guess that most listeners are familiar with machine learning, but for those who don't, it's basically this classic picture of weights, like circles that are connected with lines that are changing all of the times. And this is basically like a huge filter that changes over time. And the formation of these weights that create the neural network are going to be the main thing that affect how the design is going to look like at the end of the road, or how well the critic can actually judge the art, if it is human art or AI art. So with every training round, this formation is changing. And the way it works is we use a random seed of numbers, which is basically a huge matrix of numbers that is translated by the artist's neural network into a visual design. And in the beginning, as you can probably guess, the artist can only come up with just random blobs of colors and pixelated patterns, what makes it very easy for the critic to identify that it is non-human, as you know, like everyone that just see a big scramble of colors, unless there is like a certain pattern of colors, you can immediately identify that it is just random. And the critic can do that very, very well. But immediately after that happens, it means that the critic gives a low grade to the artist. And the artist is using this grade, it's using, let's say, the gap of how far it was for getting a perfect grade to what it actually received as input. And in a process that is called backpropagation, the artist uses this grade to adjust the weights, to change them. So the next time it comes up with a design, it will hopefully be a bit more similar to what the critic accepts as human-made art. And the bigger the deviation is, the bigger the mistake is, the bigger the change that is going to implement to the neural network. And the same process is happening with the critic at the same time. As long as it gives a high grade to the human art and a low grade to the AI art, the adjustments it makes to its own neural network are pretty small. But as the artist gets better, it becomes more challenging for the critic to grade it properly, and it gets fooled by the artist to make it give higher grades, and uses what it learns from its mistake to do the same thing, to propagate the information. So the next time it will receive an AI-generated art, it will become better and better in judging, in understanding that even though it is more similar to human art right now, it is still created by AI with the goal of giving it a low grade. So the two networks continue to compete with each other for tens of thousands of training grounds, and that require massive computational power until the artist is able to make beautiful pieces of art that you and me as humans will be fascinated by and will definitely think as visually engaging. And as I mentioned in the beginning, this is only the tip of the iceberg. This is just the basic technological process that is happening in order to generate the first artwork that we were creating. And these days, we have very, very interesting stages on top of them. And the most engaging one is the loop that we created between the AI and our gallery visitors. So we use the engagements and sentiments of millions of visitors to our gallery, and everything happens online, to improve our AI. So every time someone makes a purchase or adds a piece to its cart, or even looks longer on an art piece, we know how to translate this information. And we can actually feed this information to our algorithms. So in a sense, when you're visiting our gallery and you're engaging with our gallery, you are taking part in the creation process of the future art pieces. You are actually going to affect the way that they look like. And we use these engagements in a constant loop to just make sure that the future generation that we're generating and uploading to the gallery are going to be more and more engaging to the human eye.
And on behalf of artists and art lovers that could be listening to this podcast all over the world, do you think AI essentially is going to enhance human creativity rather than replace it?
Yes, definitely. I do believe that replacing human art is not even something that is on the table.
Yeah.
And I've received this question many times before. But the truth is that art is a part of humanity. And we see traces of art going back to the Stone Age with cave drawings.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it is possible to replace human art. But I definitely think that it is possible to enhance human art in many different ways. And the biggest way that I can think, and the fastest way that I think that can do that, is using our technology. So as I see it, AI art is a tool that can be used in countless ways to enhance human art and be utilized by artists to create new and more complex and engaging forms of art.
I'm curious, how do you think AI-generated art could affect our world in general and even our homes? Because there seems to be such a huge scope here for you guys.
Definitely. So AI should be looked at as a tool that acts as an extension of ourselves. With AI art, anyone can become an owner of a truly original, one-of-a-kind art piece. And this is such a fascinating process because it combines both human creativity and new technological abilities that were not available before. So with AI-generated art, anyone can not only own a one-of-a-kind art piece that no one else will have, it also means that it gained the ability to express its own individuality and make its space truly unique. This is such a good way when you're in your space, in your living room, and you want to make this space a bit more of yourself, and an intuitive and easy way to add a little piece that talks to you, that you can connect with, that you know that is personal to you, and immediately makes this space more about you. And another amazing thing that happens with AI-generated art and not with human art is the knowledge that there is no bias, that no human preconception, the artist preconception that took part in the artwork creation process, it is completely, it is not there, because you know that the AI didn't feel a specific feeling or didn't remember something that happened to it earlier the day that affected the way that it is now drawing this artwork. And the part of you thinking, I wonder what the artist thought when he created this art, it's not a part of the interpretation process at all. So it is now completely up to the owner of the art to give its own interpretation, its own meaning as it sees fit by the type of emotion the piece evokes in him.
What kind of feedback have you received from artists and the creative community at large about the wonders of AI-generated art? Has it largely been positive?
So I'm very happy to say that yes, it was largely positive. Maybe this is because we have the liberty of choosing the type of audience that we want to expose this technology to. But as soon as we started the company, we knew that this is going to be a big controversy, and indeed it was. So there are two different sides of this very fascinating discussion. And one of them, as you might imagine, are people that are not as familiar with how AI works and are kind of affected by Hollywood and the Terminator and the Matrix and how machines have the scary potential of taking over the world. And as they see it, art is kind of the final frontier of what AI can and can't do, and presenting them with creations that were created completely by a computer gives us kind of a mixed feelings and very, very intense comments. But to our surprise, not only tech-savvy people are really for this idea, but also a lot of artists, a lot of digital artists that are constantly on the look for new type of technologies and new ways to express their creativity, are huge support for it. I think that the key is understanding the true potential of the tool that we've developed that it does not come to replace human art, because this is simply impossible, but it just holds such a huge potential to creating new designs that no one ever seen before. I guess maybe it's kind of similar to how we used the synthesizer, started using the synthesizer to create new type of music in the 80s. And now, and it did not replace music, just added new layers to it. And I think that these days, most people, at least most of the people that are engaging with what we do, completely understand that this is simply unlocking a new level of art that they will be able to use in order to make more fascinating art.
So I've got to ask, where do you go from here? What's next for Art AI?
That's a great time to ask this question, because very, very soon, in a matter of weeks, we are going to introduce a brand new option that is an extension of what we're doing at Art AI, that allows anyone to be the actual artist of its own unique art piece. So what we have currently in Art AI Gallery is you go inside and you can see thousands of unique AI-generated artwork. Each one is one of a kind, and you can choose the one that you like the most, and you can get it, and this is it. No one else will have it. But other than helping us create new generations of art, you are not the artist of the actual art that you're purchasing. And with this new development that is going to be introduced very soon, you will be the actual artist. You will, through a very intuitive and interesting questionnaire that asks about your personal taste in art, and generally what type of art you'd like to see, and what are your, let's say, the elements that best describe your individuality and your creativity, will be able to, on the spot, create new mesmerizing pieces of art. And this technology will be able to just focus directly on you and generate on the spot hundreds of different designs. And by choosing the designs that you like the most, that are based on your answers, are going to create even more tuned designs until you reach a level of what you can say perfection, the perfect art for you that you created. And then you'll be able to order it. And again, you will be the only one that will ever have the chance to purchase this artwork, because it will never be produced again.
And as for the future of technology, AI and art, and how all those worlds are colliding at the moment and going to continue to collide, is there anything else that excites you about the future of art?
Definitely. And thinking about what we as tech people that also love art at Art AI were able to establish with this technology in such a short time. And thinking about what talented artists, which are creative by nature, will be able to create by utilizing this technology, just creates endless opportunities. Like what we were able to perform up until this point is just a fraction, a drop in the ocean, if we're making the comparison of what the community of artists and digital artists are going to be able to do that. And I'm especially excited for the way it can help new and uprising artists, because it gives anonymous artists a chance to expose themselves in the already difficult and highly saturated digital art market by becoming pioneers in the new field of AI-generated art, because there's so many digital artists, but not many know how to use AI-generated art. And the ones that will learn how to use it, how to utilize it in creative ways the fastest, will earn themselves the biggest chance of exposing themselves before others. And this edge can help new artists so much in today's market situation.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today about this. And before I let you go, though, a question I always like to ask all my guests is if there was a particular song or piece of music that has inspired them in their tech career or creative process, or maybe just helps them get pumped up before a big show, whatever it might be. Do you have a particular song that would spring to mind there?
I have several. I can really connect with this question. I'll choose Cliffs of Dover by Eric Johnson.
Oh, good choice. I will add that
right?
to the... Yeah, it's a great choice. And is there a story behind that choice?
Well, so I'm a big metal fan, but metal is usually not the most inspirational or innovative music. It just, gives you a good pace. And whenever I like looking for new ideas or just trying to get into the zone, I like to listen to some electric guitar tunes. And Cliffs of Dover, it's a song that I think I know for, I don't know, probably since I was like a teenager, that from the first time I ever heard of it, it kind of reminded me of like amazing stuff and ingenuity. And I've been listening it's been following my pretty much every media player and then every subscription cloud service ever since. And I think that probably this one of the songs that I heard the most during my lifetime.
Love that. And for anyone listening that would like to find out more information about anything that we've talked about today and how they can contact your team, what's the best way of doing that?
Certainly. So the best way to see our work is go to www.artaigallery.com. And if you go to our gallery, you will also be able to see the different generations of artwork. By browsing our gallery, you can see how over time the artwork are becoming more and more engaging, and also see the different artwork that were already purchased. And I'm also inviting everyone that fascinated about the discussion between AI and art and how they combine to join our closed Facebook group, Art AI, Art and Tech Talks, which is basically the best possible platform to engage this type of ethical and philosophical conversations.
Excellent. Well, I'll add all those links to the blog post that will accompany this episode. And if you have a video as well, I'd love to include that just to bring to life what we're talking about today. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to sit down and share your story with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun. It was really fun.
A big thank you to Ben for coming on the podcast today and talking about how AI-generated art is going to affect our world and our home, and also what it takes to train a computer to generate something that usually takes a human artist weeks, months, years. But most importantly of all, I think this is that key message that artificial intelligence and technology is not going to replace human creativity. It's going to enhance it. And that is what excites me. I'm interested in what the two together, when they collide, what can be created. But as always, this is where I pass the microphone over to you. If you are an artist or an art lover, what do you think of everything we've discussed today? I'd love to hear your views, your opinions, your insights. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You get me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn @NeilCHughes, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. But that's it for today's episode. I'll be back again tomorrow where we'll explore another industry and how technology is impacting it. And I invite you all to join me in doing it all again. So finally, just a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.